Hi everyone, welcome to The Animal Reader. The Animal Reader is an animal news website where we post daily news about animals. And today we're talking to an animal journalist, Sophie Kevany. We're going to discuss everything that has been in the news this week and her own journey in becoming an animal journalist. Welcome, Sophie.
Hi.
Hi. So first of all, we met each other very recently. I started the Animal Reader because I've worked as a journalist and started missing news about animals in a not activist way, but in a journalistic way, and like journalism way. And you approached me about the outbreak. I remember those were the cows that were 1,600 cows that were stuck on a ship. And you yourself have worked as a journalist and moved into animal journalism. How did that go?
Um, how did it go? It was tricky. It just took a long time. I think what really happened was I sort of basically, if I just put it all in a nutshell, I was writing a lot about wine in Bordeaux and wine clearly and wine and spirits in France. So I spent 8 years, the last 8 years in France. I've just moved to Spain, as you can see. I've kind of just moved in.
Yeah.
Um, so I was writing about wine, and as I wrote about wine, I began to eat a lot of food in Chateau in Bordeaux, and I began to kind of get interested in the food, and people were always telling me really interesting about the food, like we grow this or we produce this foie gras or whatever it is, it's all local and it's all organic, and
Mm-hmm.
people were very keen to tell me about their food. And then I began to sort of look a bit more into the food, and there is one kind of story that I heard afterwards, but it kind of sums things up so well. So there's a chateau called Chateau d'Ozac, which is one of the premier cru. It's a second cru, sorry. It's all very strict in Bordeaux. So the guy said to me, the director of the chateau, he said, I was kept being told that our eggs that they use to find the wines, the egg whites, are organic. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's great. I want to see the hens. And they said, no, you don't need to see the hens. And he said, yeah, I do. I want to see the hens. So he went to see them. And they were basically battery style hens that were being fed an organic diet. And he said, we can't have those in our wine. It's not biodiverse. Doesn't represent who we are, etc. He wasn't really worried about welfare, but he just said, this isn't right.
Yeah.
And then he moved to a vegan wine, and he was the first kind of well-known chateau to move to vegan. And at the same time, I was learning more and more about these things, and I was going, well, wow, if this one chateau is doing this, there must be a bit more to this story. So that's how I kind of set off down that track.
But now you only pitch now, like you try to pitch mostly animal news about animals, right? To the Guardian and like traditional media.
Yeah, it's taken a while. So of course I'm freelance, so I have to, pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I think it was a gradual. It probably took, I'd say, you know, 2 to 5 years. From the very first time I thought, oh, this is something worth exploring, and food in itself is worth exploring. There seem to be so many food stories, and then of course I got kind of caught up. Lab meat was just coming on board, and meat alternatives, and all those different things. And I went to San Francisco in 2018, and I was at one of those, the Good Food Institute had set up so there was a whole lot of things going on around food, and everything seemed to sort of point to a problem with food, whether you
Yeah.
looked at health, eating healthily, or whether you looked at non-communicable diseases, or justice, like equality, access to food,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're in America and you're talking about places where people can't buy healthy food, but there's a McDonald's, or whether you're talking about countries where food is just not available or very expensive or famine or whatever. Everything seemed to lead me back to food. And then under that, I began discovering, oh, of course, these animals, look at this. I didn't know
Yeah.
any of this.
So we're
And
gonna
that
like
was, yeah.
what we're gonna do is sorry to cut you off. But what we're gonna do because
No,
you
no,
just
go
said
ahead.
we just said food. What we're like going to do this week is just talk about like topics. And because you live in Spain and you also just mentioned food, something that really stood out for me, and I'm gonna ask the guys to like share the screen. Is this article that a Spanish minister said in Spanish? Then of course he launched a campaign on Twitter and he said eat less meat, more life, and he got a lot of backlash in Spain, right?
Mm. Which was kind of, I mean, to me, as I was comparing it before, it's a lot like when people say you need to drink less, or you need to smoke less, or we need to use less oil. Um, there's usually an instant pushback. Although I think with meat these days, many people, a lot of people would agree, yes, we need to eat less. But this is being said by a minister, and he also put figures on it. I mean, he said 30%. You know, that really is quite surprising, and I think that's what sort of triggers a lot of defensiveness. I'm not saying you shouldn't put numbers on it. You know, if you want to reach a goal, you should put a number on it. And he did get a lot of pushback, but I don't think he can have been surprised by that. I don't think anybody who's followed that kind of trajectory of type of debate in oil or in alcohol or in tobacco, you're not surprised by it. You know you're going to get the pushback, but the word is out there. And this morning, as I said, you know, I was listening to a debate on the radio. It wasn't a news show, it was a chat show. And there was, of course, one person calling in saying, yeah, I think we could eat a bit less meat. We eat a lot of meat in Spain. We eat more than we used to. And then another person saying, oh, there's absolutely no need. Meat is great. And he also, funnily enough, I noticed he said, meat doesn't have any fat in it. Meat is fat free. We should all be, it's so healthy. And of course, I think, well, you can get pieces of meat that are fat free, but you have to cook them.
Yeah.
And, you know, so
but
yeah, I an important first step, and I wouldn't be too worried about the backlash.
No, and he also mentioned, I think he mentioned it for health and for the environment, so he explained it really well. I was like, yeah, not surprised, but that another minister basically said it's what we just talked about. There's a really strong, in every country, there's a really strong meat lobby, of course. So we all know by now, right? So we should eat less meat, and actually government should promote this to eat less meat for the environment. If you don't care about animal welfare, we should be doing this for the environment. But yeah, there's a strong meat lobby in every country, I think.
And you've got the agricultural minister coming out against it, which was exactly the same in France when the health minister, who's a doctor, said a couple of years ago, look, thousands of people are dying of alcohol-related diseases. We really need to drink less in France. And the agricultural minister and the culture minister were all like, oh my God, you can't say that. How shocking. But, you know, it started a debate and people were suddenly talking about it.
Yeah. So it's good that the debate is starting. Okay, so the next subject, we haven't discussed this one before. I'm not sure if you saw this, but I thought it was really interesting. It's called aquaponic. It's growing vegetables with fish poop. Have you heard of this?
I haven't actually. It sounds really interesting.
I know, but like when this story came, I thought it was interesting too, and I went into it. It's basically like this is in Egypt, but it has been around. Like it's quite new now, right? Like growing vegetables with water, so we don't have to use like a lot of soil. But then, if you have fish, and especially tilapia fish, and they poop, and that water goes through a system, plants grow really well on that, and it's all water. Basically, the water is cleaned up, so the big chunks of shit get out of it, and then it goes into another water space where the plants grow. But something that's really interesting about this is that when I saw a video on this, and somebody asked me, do you think this is a good thing? And then if you look at the fish, they're stuck in these, like they're basically
tanks.
Stuck in tanks, but they're stuck together. So on the one hand, it's better for the environment, and there's a lot to say for it to grow plants with water. And on the other hand, and it's also the water gets back to the fish then. So it's a whole system. You don't need to use new fresh water the whole time. It goes to the plants take everything they need from it, and then it goes back into the fish, and the fish get clean water then. But it's still quite sad for fish, and like we have the chat open. If anybody has an opinion on this, you can just respond about it. But I kind of took you by surprise also because I forgot to show you this one, but I wanted to discuss this one. Go on.
But tilapia in general, from what I've heard described, and I haven't traveled much in Africa, but I did live in South Africa, and I have kind of read a bit and visited a bit in other parts of Africa, although I've never seen it. But everybody, in areas where tilapia is cultivated, tilapia used to be like your pig. You know, you just give him all the scraps, or her, and then you eat it. And it sounds wonderful, but I think you put your finger on it. The problem is stocking density. So if you have one tilapia in a tank and it just gets big, and then you kill it and you eat it and it does all the wonderful things with the plants, that sounds okay. If you have all these tilapia crammed into a tank, I don't think that could be healthy. I wonder, does it involve antibiotics? And it doesn't seem very nice for the fish.
No. Yeah, for the fish, it doesn't look nice for the fish. But the one thing they then sell, so it's funny, these farms sell the tilapia. When they get bigger, they sell them. And they also sell their vegetables. So it's like two things they farm in there. But the one thing that what you just mentioned also is that one of the farmers said that tilapia has a bad name for being a dirty fish, or like it grows in dirt. And here they say it's clean water. But then, keeping Because somebody asked me, what do I think of this? And I think just keeping fish in small tanks in any case is not nice. Although it did look nicer than some of the fish farms I've seen, but still it's not a nice way. It's not nice for the fish. The next
Yeah, I think if we all have one tilapia, that's one thing. If everybody
Exactly.
starts to have more and more, because that tends to be the trend. You know, we start out with we each have one, and then suddenly we have two because we're always looking for productivity and more. So that's usually the problem.
That's exactly how like farming got the way it is now, right? Like we started just small, and then it like in the old times we just had 1 or 2 pigs, and now we have thousands. Talking
Yeah,
about
and there are advantages to that because it means you don't. I mean, I wrote my thesis, my undergraduate thesis, on the fact that I proved, or I tried to prove anyway, that philosophy in ancient Greece wouldn't have happened unless there was a surplus food supply, because the philosophers couldn't have sat around philosophizing all day unless someone else was growing the food. So,
yeah,
you
true.
know, there are extraordinary advantages to the fact that we're all not, you know, basically living on subsistence farms, but we've seemed to
True.
have gone extremely in the other direction now.
Yeah, exactly. Like we went a bit. I do like it's true if like there's only a few farmers, but we went a bit overboard. And this one, I wanted to show another one, and I have like two. This one I wanted to show you. Sorry, we'll discuss that one for everybody who saw the one. We'll discuss that one too. But like you just said, now we have farms with like tens of thousands of animals on them, and we're based in Holland. You're based in Spain. The Netherlands has a lot of barn fires, and I was just telling you this before also. The reason why I started the animal reader is because 2 years ago, it happens a lot, barn fires, and there was a story on I think chickens that died in a farm. It was chickens or pigs, but there was a story on like the animals died in a farm in the fire, and the whole article was about, oh my God, this is horrible for the farmer. And nowhere it was mentioned that the pigs were burnt alive, like the suffering, nothing of that. It was just like the economic loss, and you know, it's so sad for him. And I was so shocked by that. And that's the whole reason I started the Animal Reader, to like create stories or write stories where animals are the main focus. Because I just said it to you too. If you burn me or you burn my cat, the pain is exactly the same. But if you burn me, there's a whole like, oh my God, that's so sad. And if okay, in a cat's case, it's a bit different, but all these chickens, they got burned, and it's basically they got burned. That's it. But you also you wrote you wanted to pitch a story on barn fires, right?
I did. I started pitching a story and I started looking into it, but I didn't get very far with it. So as a freelance journalist, what often happens is, you know, if it's an animal story and someone wants it, then I do a lot more research on it. But if it's just something I'm pitching to people, then I probably do a very, you know, just a bit of research. So with this one, I got as far as finding out, and this was one in Holland, I think, and there had been one in Northern Ireland as well. And apparently someone said to me, oh, there's a lot of electrics involved in pig sheds. And maybe also they're not very well maintained, or maybe they're very well maintained, who knows, but there are a lot of electrics and there are a lot of pigs. So and in some cases there may be wood, or you know, they're farm buildings,
Yeah,
so they're
it's
not fire resistant.
a lot of electrics, and it's also, I think in Holland there's already been reports that they know why, but basically the government doesn't want to give money to farmers to change that. So it's also the way they're built, these farms. So there's also not a fire happens and like, you know, water comes down like a normal, like what we do for humans in hotels and stuff. You don't have any of these. So it's basically, it comes down to that we just don't care that much. Like if it happens, then it's a loss and you have insurance, the farmer gets his money back. And that's how they're seen, as actual just things. And
Well, I think also the other angle I noticed was certainly in the Northern Irish, it was, I think, it was up in the north of Ireland. I think it was in Northern Ireland, but the farmer was very upset because he'd lost years of genetic, not manipulation, but breeding. He'd bred the best possible pigs as he could over the years, which principally means buying the right semen.
yeah.
So he felt he'd lost this huge investment over years, which of course he was very upset about. But again, and in the photo of the fire, you could see all these sort of twisted metal cages. And that was sort of, people on Twitter at least were reacting to that, saying, you know, this is where the pigs were kept, in a metal cage. And that, yes, we sympathize that the farmer's upset and he's lost a lot of work, but nobody's mentioning the fact that these animals were basically imprisoned in there.
But that is exactly, like, if you think about it, right? Because it happens so much in Holland, and it's very, like, we're such a small country, but it's a disgrace for our country almost that it happens so much. I think I've written for this year already 4 or 5 stories in the Netherlands only about farm fires. But just to imagine if you're stuck, and we keep them stuck in there, right? Like farmers, like logical, they want to keep them in there, so there's no way for them to escape or nothing. There's not a door that opens, and you basically just get burnt alive. And if you really think about it, it's so horrible, and still just happens. People are upset for a second, and it is a little bit changing that people starting to think now more about, okay, the animals. Like I think it was in England, I think there was a fire with pigs, and there were some people there trying to save the pigs, so that was good that they tried to do that. But
And there were all those pigs that drowned in America. I think that was a bit more of a shock for people because during the floods, and I think it was a couple of years ago, so there was pigs literally locked in barns because, well, or not unlocked. And the owners fled because they had to save themselves from the flood, and the pigs were left. But in a fire, the pig gets burnt up. In a flood, it just blocks the rivers, and these bloated carcasses were being fished out of the river, so it became a massive health hazard. So I have a feeling, I'm not sure, but it'd be interesting to know if something changed in America as a result of that, at least on public health grounds.
Yeah, yeah. The next story I wanted to talk about is, I'll first show us a little bit of a video where we can talk over it. You've seen the story, right? The migrating. This has been like, even in traditional media, this has been like, this is really cute though, just to go from fires to something really cute. But these elephants, they've been traveling through China, and something I find interesting about, these are feeders that they're just sleeping. What I find most interesting about this story is that they left, I think, in the beginning of April, or for a few months now they've been traveling. And if you look at traditional media, it's a lot of it starts off, it's not completely, but it starts off with the damage they're doing. Sometimes it's even the headline, the damage they've done in China. I think it's over $1 million. And at the Animal Reader, we never mention the damage because it's more interesting, like, why are they doing this? And if you look into that, they're leaving because there's less food there. The wild elephants in China have doubled, but their living space has become smaller. So basically, they're looking for food and traveling. It is good that they're protected in China, so everybody is following the story, like, where are they going? And those were the elephants. What do you think about the story?
Yeah. I think I find it very moving, especially the pictures of them asleep. I mean, it's just extraordinary wildlife, and I think one split off and the whole story, it's just fascinating to follow that just from a whole wildlife point of view. But I feel, animals, when they come near humans, wild or domestic, generally the animal comes off worse. Yeah. So I kind of have this nice feeling where I enjoy watching this, and also I'm not writing the story, so I don't have to panic about deadlines or anything like that. It's so nice to watch something that I'm not covering. And then I feel this sort of mounting sense of dread of well, what's going to happen, because it doesn't usually end well. So
But that's also I think a whole big crisis about to happen. That's human wildlife conflicts, right? We keep writing about this, but basically all these bears, elephants, tigers, lions that still live in the wild, they are, because we are taking more and more of their space, and they always get basically blamed for it. Like, they're the ones, like, if an elephant comes to eat crops in, I think it's Sri Lanka, and there's so many of those conflicts there where people just poison them. And there was also this week a story in Indonesia. Ooh. And Sumatran elephant had been found beheaded in Indonesia. They poisoned the elephant, and the story was there also the same. It was also for his tusks, so it's like double. Like, on the one hand, humans and elephants meet each other, and then I think defense or human tries to kill an elephant. But in this case, also illegal wildlife trade, of course. Like, people also want them for their tusks, but it's happening more and more often. The numbers are just growing about how many wild animals get killed. Next week we're doing an interview about a bear that was shot in Japan a few weeks ago, and he was also coming in areas where humans live. But then what we do is we just kill an animal. That's our default behavior as humans, it seems.
But it's becoming, you've just summed it up. I mean, the animal area gets smaller. The human area, whether it's for people or for crops, or for food animals, gets bigger. And I think one of the reasons we are now paying attention to that a lot more since COVID-19 is because of the zoonotic disease risk. So if you think, I keep thinking the thing that sums it up best for me is that last scene in Contagion, the movie. So the last, you kind of don't know where this disease has come from, and all kinds of things happen. And then at the end, and I have actually asked a zoonotic disease specialist about this to say, is this real? And he said, yeah, it's pretty real. So what happens is you see the bulldozer chopping down the trees where the bats live to
Mm-hmm.
make way for a fruit plantation or crops or whatever. It's making way, it's clearing the land. The bats fly out of the trees and they fly over the pig shed, and they, their droppings fall on the pigs shed, pigs eat them, and then the woman in the movie, who is the first person to get the disease, she's like patient zero, she eats or shakes the hand of the chef, so they kind of cover themselves really well, because it's not necessarily from the meat, but maybe she shook his hand and whatever, and she gets really sick, and then you have this pandemic. So that's what happens. We push out to grow crops, to build buildings for people, or
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
factories,
Exactly.
whatever.
Yeah.
The animals get pushed back. We come into closer and closer contact with them. I mean, whether that's AIDS, that was Nipah virus, by the way, that one. So whether it's AIDS or whether it's Nipah virus or whatever, zoonotic diseases are something that is very much bringing our attention to. And of course, we don't, or we very rarely get, well, I mean, most of the zoonotic diseases that we get are from a host, an intermediary animal,
Yeah.
and that's usually a food, something to do with food. And we don't know where COVID-19 came from. I know there's lots of theories, but ultimately we don't know exactly where it came from.
Yeah.
Something like AIDS, we do now know the HIV virus, and but it's always wild animals, something in the middle, and then humans. So people are really, I hope, thankfully, now beginning to pay attention to that, of course, because it's affecting us
Yeah, yeah,
negatively.
because yeah, that's when we. I think like that. Maybe that's also logical that humans behave like this. Like when it starts affecting you yourself, then you want to change. So just just stop eating meat for the environment or for animals. But once the moment like you notice it, then we'll change. But that's just a whole other discussion about why people behave the way they do. You mentioned just like with COVID-19. I just wanted to mention this one. This is also something that I think is quite alarming, bird flu. Like, these are happening all over the world at the moment, and something that they're also now jumping to humans. They cannot go from human to human yet, but they are jumping to humans. So every time, like, that's always a sentence at the animal at the bottom, like, the only solution we have or governments have at the moment is just kill all the animals. And that's what we keep doing. Like, we find bird flu somewhere, kill all the animals, and that's it. We find with humans, we like that's also like with humans, we keep going to find vaccines, and we keep we try to save us humans. But when an animal gets sick, it's like our default thing is just kill the animal, point. But it is quite alarming, I think, with bird flu, because now that it can jump to a human, it's only a matter of time it will jump from a human to human, and we will be stuck in the same as we are now.
Well, yes, and that, I mean, there's that risk appears to be more and more present. And I think one of the ways that that risk is being answered, there are several ways. So one of them is biosecure farms, and they don't, from an animal welfare point of view, they don't look great. So I'm thinking of the multi-story pig farms in China.
Yeah.
Certainly they are biosecure. They are very safe. They're probably much safer than your pig shed or whatever, or your backyard farmer. Your backyard farmer is where wild animals are going to come into contact, whether they're birds or whatever, with the domestic animal and then pass it on. So but how biosecure do we want to be? And I think a lot of people may never see animals again. And that's slightly worrying to me, that when I mean, I sometimes wonder, where are all the animals? I remember looking, they seem to have kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
And they've gone into sheds. And I was talking to someone who lived in Brabant a couple of days ago, and he said, we just grew up with these huge sheds all around us. And he said he never thought about the animals inside. He didn't connect his food with the big sheds with the animals because he never saw the animals.
Yeah,
So
true.
that kind of thing, you can vaccinate. And people were vaccinating mink against, in America. They were I think they have developed. I think it was supposed to be ready in May. I haven't checked, but mink were getting a COVID vaccine, and that was surprising to me. But it was it was great because the pharma industry jumped right on that, and they were like, okay, we have the cure, so we can keep fur farming. And I think a lot of people feel that's what they would call a techno fix. Okay, so
Yeah.
you vaccine or you cull or whatever. We manage it. We
Yeah.
don't look at the source. And another person I was talking to the other day said basically what we haven't done, we seem to, or we're at risk of saying, okay, we have a healthy animal, that means welfare, because we've vaccinated or given them some medicine or we've put them in a biosecure farm or whatever. It
Yeah.
should be the other way around. We should start with animal welfare, and then you have a healthy animal and you go from there. So in other words, if we were starting with animal welfare, we might have farms, but we certainly, I don't think, would be building these really highly dense farms if we started with animal welfare. We could still have big farms, but not these kind.
But do you also think that that is you and me talked about it yesterday, but that is the thing that I was also like part of the animal reader is that do you think people are desensitized from having feelings towards animals also by if you look how we talk about animals in regular media? I just mentioned the barn fires that we always talk about the farmers, but like a lot of animals get called it. Like they're a thing, you know. If you say the word "it," you every and like in every the BBC, CNN, the Guardian, it's always an it. It's never a he or
I
a
don't
she or
think in the Guardian. I hope not.
oh,
I
sorry.
think well often well the other problem is because I've written and
Yeah, I
when
know.
you come to I was trying to write a sentence the other day and I said internal organs were hanging from the sheep and I didn't know whether the sheep was a he or a she, so I couldn't say his or her. I had to construct the sentence in a different way because I didn't want to use it. I didn't know whether the sheep was a he or a she, and no one's going to tell me or is able to tell me. So you just have to write that sentence in a different way. But I do think that even if it's only changing slightly, I think it's changing slightly. And I think the
Yeah.
other thing is with people, it's very uncomfortable. Imagine talking to children. I mean, talking to children about where their meat comes from. It's hard, but I did interview someone the other day who is producing very short 30-second cartoons that kind of can bring this subject up of how you're eating an animal. Yes, we talk about the cute chicken in the book, or chicken licking and the sky is falling in, and then you're eating this chicken. And it's a way to kind of get into that topic which you almost want to shield
Yeah,
children
that's
from.
yeah.
So
But it's
there's, we want to protect ourselves, we want to protect our children, it's difficult
yeah.
to talk about, etc., etc. We don't have the words.
No, that's true. But it's good that, and like you say, if the Guardian is changing it or is already changing it, it's a good thing to start talking about animals differently in media, so then people have more feeling towards them. I think that's really a part of the problem. Also, people don't have this. So you read news stories on animals, but you have no like the wording. You know, like that's how media works, right? Like we have this whole discussion on fake news and everything, but it's the words you use that really kind of like touch people or not.
I
And
know,
me,
and I think it was Peter. They brought out this thing about how we should all stop saying, kill two birds with one stone, or bringing home the bacon, or And
yeah.
I kind of laughed at it at first, but now if I say something like, "Oh, you can kill two," I think, "Oh no, okay, I don't want to talk about killing birds with stones. It's okay." So
Yeah.
it's gradual, but
Yeah,
yeah, I
it's
think it's very important, and it's important to say, well, we're eating pig, not pork, or you're eating cow, not beef.
exactly, and also like, but the words like livestock, cattle, you like there's so many words we use, or beef, or that you don't, you really don't link it anymore to a like a calf or a cow. You know, if you hear beef, you just think or steak, like yeah, steak. You don't think that used to be a cow. That doesn't come up in your brain if you always just read steak. But there's
No,
certain,
and one day maybe we'll be talking about lab steak, and we'll just call that steak, or cell-based
yeah,
agriculture. I think that's one of the things that's made me feel most I know it's got all kinds of problems. It's got scale-up issues. It's got cost issues. There's loads of issues, but people, it exists. We can
yeah.
now grow, and it's so much more efficient. At least if you manage to get solar power if you use solar power rather than electricity.
Yeah, and I think that's also I hear a lot of animal rights activists saying that lab-grown meat is going to change things, because something that's really interesting, that even though you have so many animal welfare organizations and so for so many years people really fight for animals, of course, but in this day in 2021 we kill more animals than ever. That's also because there are more people than ever on the planet, but we kill so many animals. So lab-grown meat
Well, it's also
could.
because we eat more. I mean, some of us eat more and some of us eat less. There's this huge disparity.
Yeah, and we eat
That's the
like
other
yeah,
reason.
that's true. Yeah,
So we're
that's
eating
true.
way too much. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, we eat.
in
Yeah.
high-income countries, developed countries, whatever, in Europe, a lot of us are eating far too much.
Yeah, yeah, we need breakfast, lunch, dinner, and you have people who want meat in all three of those things. We're gonna end with like a well, actually, I was gonna say nice story. It's basically a cute pic. I think this is a baby. It's not a nice story. This is a baby orca that this is happening right now. Do have to say I haven't checked right before the show what the latest is on this story, but it's a baby orca. His name is Toa, which means warrior in Maori. In New Zealand, he got stranded on the beach, and his family was around him. From what I understand, is that they couldn't put him back in the water until the family left. So the family had left, and they got him back into the water, but now they can't find the family anymore. And he's only 4 months old, if I say that, like a few months old, so he needs his mom. So they're now feeding him with a bottle, and but they interviewed a wildlife rescuer there who said that if they don't find his mom, really, it's a he, if they don't find his mom really fast, he's gonna die, because they don't have the facility to take care of orcas long term. And this is a baby who's an unweaned baby. He really needs his mom.
Oh God, it's just, you know, and well, I'll follow the story. I don't know what to say. You know, I suppose if someone wasn't helping him, it would be a natural thing and he would die naturally. But it's heartbreaking that they're going to try and save him and not be able to. I mean, that's very hard. We're not.
The good thing that's always, I think, is that so many people really like these kind of stories also always do it really well, because people really feel for this one animal, right? Like it's a baby and he's there. And I think they've asked now everybody to look out for if they see a family pot, like a pot of will somewhere, because they need to locate the mom and connect them. And hopefully that will happen.
And also this kind of story allows us to have empathy with animals, but without us having to do anything. You know, it's not like someone's going to show you this baby pig and then say, look, you can't eat bacon anymore. They can show you a baby orca, and we won't have to. I mean, we all feel moved by that story, but we don't necessarily have to change anything, although we probably should eat less fish.
Yeah.
You know, these are the kind of things, or less gear in the water. You know, there's a whole story, there's a whole backstory there of, or maybe...
You said, fishing. Just to put up one more story, this is from yesterday.
Humpback issue.
And this is all fishing gear. An animal rights activist was interviewed by Reuters there, and they said there were 8 have been found dead recently in Brazil, all whales, and 5 of them had fishing gear around them. So, but that is also something that we know, like even with documentaries like Seaspiracy, people watch this but still have a hard time with, you know, to stop eating fish. Is basically what you can do as a human is stop eating certain animals, and you can save these. But that's not.
Yep, and hopefully, and that's what the lab grown or the meat alternatives, they say, look, we're going to make it really easy for you to do this. That's across the board, whether it's plant or cell based or whatever. Their view is we need to make it really easy for people to switch.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sophie. I hope we can do this. Now we're like all 3. I hope we can do this again. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Let us know in our comments if you like this kind of things, that we discuss weekly news with the journalists. Thank you.